Välkommen tillbaka till Småbolagsdagen. So let me introduce our next biotech CEO. So a warm welcome. CFO, a representative at least. To say a warm welcome to Keith Alexander, who's the CFO of Expression Biotech.
Thank you. And thank you all for joining us today and for listening to my presentation. Before we get started, just a quick disclaimer, because we are our first North listed company, we have to have this disclaimer, and by listening to this presentation, you're bound by what's in the disclaimer. So just at a glance, Expression Biotechnologies is a high potential vaccine pipeline development company focused on infectious diseases and oncology. We have core intellectual property that's been validated both by partners and also by late-stage clinical development. We're part of the global vaccine market. That's what we're going after, and that's a rapidly growing market. Of course, the sizes we see here are impacted by COVID-19, but still, even after that, we're expected to grow, or the market is expected to grow by 10% on an annual basis through 2030. So it's a rapidly growing marketplace. And then what I'll talk about today is that we're rapidly advancing toward several key catalysts, including a phase 3 readout and a potential commercial launch in early next year. So I'm going to split the presentation into two pieces. First, a high-level overview of the company, and then we'll dive into a couple of our pipeline products. So starting with the management team, we have a lot of experience, over 150 years of experience from top companies, including Novo Nordisk, ALK, GSK, Sanofi, but also many smaller companies. We have startup and small company biotech experience. Everybody except for me, unfortunately. I'm a banker. I have about 20 years of banking experience. I worked for JP Morgan in New York City for about a decade before moving to Denmark in 2013. Moving to our technology platform, we're combining two pieces of core IP. The first one is the Express2 platform for protein expression. And so what we can do is we can express proteins, surface proteins called antigens, which trigger an immune response. And we combine that with a particle VLP technology, and this is a shell that we can put our proteins on. And so when you put the two of them together, you get an image that looks like the one on the presentation. And that looks to your body like a virus. So your body sees a virus and reacts as if a virus is in the body. It triggers an immune response, but it doesn't have any of the nasty stuff inside of it. It's an empty shell that triggers the immune response. So our vaccines are using this technology as the underlying technology. At a high level, this is what our pipeline looks like. This excludes our collaborations with universities and academics. We have a COVID-19 vaccine, and that's rapidly approaching the phase 3 results expected any day now. We have we have more that I'll talk about there as well. We have a breast cancer vaccine, which is rapidly approaching the phase 1 trial. We have an influenza vaccine that we're trying to develop in collaboration with the University of Copenhagen. That will be a nasal vaccine, which overcomes a lot of the problems with getting an injection. And then we have a CMV vaccine that we're developing with a Danish partner called Evaxion. And so we're using artificial intelligence to come up with a drug candidate there. On top of that, we have this exploratory section, which is really internal R&D, where we're looking at new indications that can be fast to develop, have a high value impact on our pipeline, or R&D developments that can accelerate our pipeline in some way or make it of increased value. So I talked about catalysts. Let's get straight to the point. Any day now, in mid-2023, we're expecting the phase 3 results from the COVID vaccine. And we're also expecting 12-month durability data from the phase 2 trial. And I know it's a story that people have heard many times, but I'll explain why it's still interesting in just a moment. After that, our out-licensing partner, which is Bavarian Nordic, that's the BN, should initiate rolling submissions with the FDA and the EMA, and then they'll aim for market launch in early next year, or when it's approved by the regulators. On the breast cancer side, we're currently doing non-clinical toxicology studies in non-human primates, and that is going to be finished near the end of this year and early next year. And immediately following that, we'll file our clinical trial application. And then as soon as the regulators have approved it, we would like to start the first in human trials. So we have several de-risking milestones coming up in the very near future that I think are interesting. The last thing from a company perspective I'd like to talk about is cash. At the end of the first quarter, we had 72 million Swedish crowns in cash. We raised in May another 54.5 million. And then looking to the near future in terms of non-dilutive sources, well, actually the TO8 warrant subscription will not be non-dilutive, that will be dilutive. But we have a warrant subscription in September, and then potential milestones coming from the COVID vaccine related to completion of the phase 3 and the EMA and the FDA filings. And really, when those come, those will be a game changer for us. On top of that, I would say that we are always looking at other non-dilutive sources such as grant funding. In fact, the Mucovax influenza project is primarily grant funded. Okay, now looking at our two top indications, ABNCoV2 is our next generation COVID vaccine. What we've seen from the data is that it has a strong boosting effect across the variants of concern. We see a similar level of neutralizing antibodies for both the Wuhan and the Omicron variants. It doesn't use an adjuvant, so it doesn't need to have something added to it that can affect the safety profile. It's durable. What we've seen in the 6-month phase 2 data is that it maintained a higher level of neutralizing antibody response after 6 months than the vaccines from Pfizer and Moderna, so it lasts longer than them. And right now we're waiting on the 12-month data. I mean, it would be really, really nice if you could get one vaccine and be covered and not have to worry about it anymore. And so finally, the last point on there is that we're expecting these two pieces of data anytime now. And why should you still care about a COVID vaccine? Well, based on these points, ours looks better than what you see on the marketplace already. And even if not all of us are getting the COVID vaccine anymore, people who are at risk, either they have they're old or they're young, or they have some kind of disease that makes their immune system not as strong, they still need to get this. And to us, this is a bit like a flu vaccine, and the flu vaccine market is $7 billion a year. So it's still a nice-sized market, and there is room for improvement. In terms of how the economics work, the way it works is we have a company, a joint venture called AdaptVac that we started in 2017 with the University of Copenhagen. We own 34% of them. They have the direct licensing agreement with Bavarian Nordic, and they were paid 4 million euros back in 2020. They're eligible for up to 136 million euros in additional milestone or sales and development milestone payments. And then they also get a single to double-digit percentage amount of Bavarian's revenues. And there you can see in the call-out box in the bottom left that there's a language around the submission of the final study report for the phase 3 and the EMA and FDA filings, both as triggers for milestone payments. And then how do we get money? We own 34% of AdaptVac, so we get 34% of whatever they get. And on top of that, we get up to 2 million in additional commercial milestone payments. And that's a small part of the overall pie, but the 34% is the big part. And then finally, we get a lower double-digit percentage of AdaptVac's royalties from this. Okay, now that's all I'm going to say on COVID. I'll switch to breast cancer now. Our breast cancer treatment is called ES2B-C001. So just a bit about breast cancer. There are 2.3 million new cases of breast cancer diagnosed worldwide each year. It affects 1 in 8 women. This is a terrible disease. I'm sure we all know people who've been affected by it. One of my best friends, his wife died from it 2 years ago. On the right-hand side, it's broken down into 3 different types of breast cancer. There's HER2 negative, HER2 low, HER2 positive. We're focused on HER2 positive, and there are approximately 180,000 people diagnosed each year. And that's across the US, EU27, and Japan. So the market size, how do we define it? We start with, of course, the whole market, which is 1.2 million patients treated per year for HER2 positive and low breast cancer. That's worth 125 billion euros a year. And then if we focus on the EU top 5 countries in the US, that narrows it down to 20 billion a year. And then if we focus it down even further to the peak market share that we aim to get, which we aim for 20% market share after 4 years, that's the assumption. That gets us to a 4.3 billion euro market per year market share. And of course, that won't be us who is actually taking that. Our goal is to develop it in the phase 1 and preclinical trials, and then to out-license it to a pharmaceutical company, a much larger one, who can take it through the phase 2 and phase 3 trials. And then they will sell it to medical centers who will deliver it to the end users. So the current standard of care in metastatic HER2 positive breast cancer is a mix of non-targeted therapies and HER2 targeted therapies. And LOT 1, 2, and 3, that refers to line of treatment. So non-targeted therapies, you have things like endocrine therapy, radiotherapy, and chemotherapy. And the problem with these is they're not targeting, so they attack healthy cells as well, and that results in side effects. And then we have a HER2 targeted therapy, and that's a lot like these other ones. There are other ones out there that are antibody drug conjugates, tyrosine kinase inhibitors, and monoclonal antibodies. These also come with a host of side effects, such as cardiac toxicity. Patients can develop resistance, and they can also have a very short-term effect. We hope that our vaccine will come with a solution for all of these. So just at a high level, describing how our vaccine works compared to the others. If you look in the bottom left, you can see that Herceptin and Perjeta, they're targeting one extracellular domain, and we're targeting all 4 extracellular subdomains using our combination of the Express2 protein expression system on top of a VLP. And so what we've seen in other vaccines that have this approach, and there I'd refer to the HPV vaccines like Gardasil and Cervarix. They're highly immunogenic. They have an attractive safety profile. They last a long time. They can be combined with the existing standard of care. So this could be used on top of Herceptin and Perjeta. And they're also much more transportable. It doesn't require a lot of machinery. It's a vaccine that you can administer easily. So I'm just going to show a little bit of data here that shows why we're very excited about this one. And on the left-hand side, what we're showing is in mice who would normally develop a tumor, that's the control line, what the tumor volume is. And so the black line shows that it increases over time. And then when it's administered with our vaccine on its own, that's the green line, it's a much lower amount. And then our vaccine, including an adjuvant, it's virtually not growing any tumors at all. On the right-hand side, we show the a control again in mice who would normally die from tumors within 32 weeks. And when they're administered with our vaccine with the adjuvant, almost all of them are surviving until the end point, which is in this case around 38 weeks. The only one that did die was not related to the vaccine at all. Some other data showing what happens to lung metastases in a petri dish when they're administered with our vaccine. If you look at the control, these are lungs that will get the tumors on their own without any administration, and you can see that in the control you get a range from 100 to 500 lung metastases. When they're administered with our vaccine, either with or without the adjuvant, there are virtually no metastases that are developing. And then finally, on the right-hand side, what we show here is versus trastuzumab. So on the left-hand chart on the right-hand side, the control is the white box with the black line around it. There are a number of colonies that are developing. The blue box is when they're administered with trastuzumab, and it's a much smaller amount. And then the 4 other columns are when they're administered with our vaccine, and also their small amounts. Now, there are some types of colonies that are resistant to trastuzumab, and this we see in patients as well. They develop resistance. And that's on the right-hand side. These are colonies that still develop when they're administered with trastuzumab, but what we see with our vaccine is that they don't develop, at least not to the same extent. So I won't go into what's happening in detail here, except to say or reiterate again that we're aiming to file the CTA in very, very early 2024 and then start the phase 1 as soon as we can thereafter. With that, I'll take any questions.
Thank you so much. So how long have you been in the company for?
Yeah, I've been with the company since October 2020, so
Okay, yeah.
about 2.5 years.
Let's talk a little bit about your CEO, Bent Fransen. He's living in Denmark, I think. He was appointed CEO in 2019, and he also has a background within the finance, but also has been working for like 25 years in the life science sector. He's been working at CMC Biologics, Ensgene, Coloplast. But could you add something about his, what are his strengths and what has he achieved so far, would you say?
I think he can be credited a lot with the transition that we've had in the company. When the company was founded in 2010, it was founded to start a CRO business doing protein expression for other companies.
Yeah.
And in 2019, when he became CEO, it was his idea and the board's idea as well, supported by the board, to transition into being a pipeline-driven company. And immediately afterwards, the COVID virus came, and we launched the COVID vaccine. So it was very timely for us as a company that develops technology for vaccines, to transition to a pipeline-driven company.
Okay, thank you. And back to you. You describe yourself as a banker.
Yeah.
How could your background in the banking industry contribute and benefit the company today?
Sure. Well, yeah, banker is a broad statement. I was an equity analyst, actually working for JP Morgan, and then I was a strategist, and I led the asset management business into North America at Danske Bank when I came over. I think it's been a huge learning experience for me, just to be brutally honest. It's a completely different game than I used to be involved in. I really enjoy that we're trying to build something here and something that has a positive impact on people. But I'm learning every day. I think I bring some pretty solid financial strengths into the company. And so things are not new to me, especially when it comes to dealing with bankers and all of our partners. But I still get a great learning experience.
So what are the financials like? How would you describe the situation from a finance perspective?
Well, it's very interesting working for a small biotech company. I mean, this is about as it's an interesting segment of the economy, especially coming from a big bank where things are very stable. In biotech, the markets have been challenging recently. That's a bit of an understatement. But it really gives me an opportunity to figure out, where can we be more efficient? Where can we save money? How can we make the money work the longest? But most importantly, where can we create shareholder value?
So what is your burn rate?
It varies by quarter. I did show you the cash burn chart. So we had 71 million at the end of the first quarter. I believe we had around 110 million at the end of the fourth quarter. So that would imply about 40 million of burn. But that's not what we expect as the burn rate going forward. That goes up and down quarter to quarter.
Let's talk about the COVID vaccine for a start. Although the vaccine might seem a bit outdated, as you mentioned, you explained how it's still relevant for older individuals and some target groups at risk. But what is the size of this market? I couldn't.
Sure.
I don't remember if you mentioned that, but I don't think you did.
Well, first of all, it's definitely not outdated. It's this will be a novel vaccine. If and when it makes it to market, it will be better than what's out there. So the current market size, I haven't looked at the updated figures, but I know it was still well over 30 billion in 2022. So while it's coming down, and it's coming down at a decent pace, it's still. I mentioned that I think it will be like the flu market over time, and that's a 7 billion plus market.
Yeah, for sure, it's not outdated, but how sustainable is the COVID vaccine market? Would you say, will it go on and on forever, or will also the elder people might not be dependent on the vaccine for how many years?
I'm not an
to come?
epidemiologist, but my understanding, based on what everybody says, is that it's here to stay.
Okay.
That's not going away.
And breast cancer, you said that it affects 1.3 million women every year, and 1 in 8 women are developing breast cancer sometime during their lifetime. What defines the women that you said are in your serviceable, attainable market? I think they were 37,000, or how many were they?
Well, the exact number I can refer back to, but
what defines them? Because
it's HER2 positive breast cancer. People who have HER2 positive breast cancer. That's the area that we're focusing on at the very beginning.
And in the top 5 EU
exactly
countries.
top 5 EU countries, US and Japan. Yeah.
And how likely is it that you can address them, and through their doctors, obviously? How can they be? How can you reach them?
Well, I think there's some time until we need to figure out the logistics around distribution and things like that. But really what we'd like to do is partner with a much larger organization and out-license it to them for the phase 2 and the phase 3. And then they will figure out the distribution strategy. But a company like a big 5 pharma, they of course will know how to get to the market precisely. And of course, we have some high-level estimates in our business plan, but it's up to the partner to come up with that final plan.
Of course. We have a question from the audience. What is your edge against the major vaccine players?
Sure. And there I would refer back to that one simple slide. I mean, of course, we have the same level of protection as the other ones and a nice safety profile. But I think the edge will be the durability. So far, we're much more durable on a 6-month basis. Hopefully, the 12-month data is very strong. And beyond that, we're very transportable. You don't require any cold chain storage or transport. It can be transported at room temperature. We've even done some tests where it's stable up to 50 degrees Celsius. So, I mean, it's a very stable vaccine.
Thank you. Let's talk about the stock a little bit, because I read an article in October, late October, stating that your stock is on the verge of becoming a lottery stock because it has a very high monthly fluctuation. According to an analyst that had looked upon your stock, it has a fluctuation of 39% monthly. Can you comment on that a little bit?
I mean, we as a company have been very much correlated with the COVID-19 vaccine market. So what we've seen is that our share has been pretty consistent with other COVID-19 focused vaccine companies. And until the breast cancer vaccine is far enough along to be really given the value that it deserves, that will probably be the case. I think a lot of biotech companies are also just volatile in nature. I mean, when we talk to our auditors about the fair value pricing models of different warrants and things like that, they expect 80% volatility for a small biotech company like us, looking at peer companies. So it's part of the game, unfortunately.
Thank you. Could you, as my last question, or actually the last question from the audience, is please explain your capital allocation, your strategy for that, and what is the future awaits?
So if I understand correctly, it's how we allocate capital across our different projects.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Our primary focus right now is on the breast cancer vaccine. We don't need to spend any more money on the COVID-19 vaccine. That's fully in Bavarian Nordic's hands. So it's pure upside for us.
Okay.
And then we also allocate money to exploratory projects. I don't recall the exact distribution, but we published it in the use of proceeds in our latest rights issue. But the bulk of the money is going to the breast cancer vaccine project.
Okay. Thank you, Keith, and thank you for your presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Warm applause for our guests.
Thank you.
CFO Keith Alexander.